And this person made me feel suicidal to the point where I was like, that's it, that's my way out. I've had no proper upbringing, I've had no love, etc. Maybe this is all because of this. If I went away, that person's problems will be solved. And that's how I saw it. Rediscover your personal power. Without even knowing, childhood patterns can actually trickle into adulthood. And we could be completely oblivious to this. Now, I remember when I was going through a deep dive and looking at my feelings in my childhood, and I wasn't brought up by my parents, I was brought up by my grandparents, and I didn't know my mother at all. And I knew my father, he was in the picture somewhere. For me, in order to feel loved, secure, without even knowing, I would turn to external people in my family for validation, to make me feel worthy, to make me feel loved, to make me feel secure, to give me that sense of belonging, even a sense of identity, to show that I have a family, I belong somewhere, and I am loved. But these external people in my family, who I thought were family and who were going to give me that sense of security, that sense of identity, they would blame me for their downfalls and their insecurities and their jealousy so that they could feel better about themselves. They had no responsibility or ownership over their own feelings, but rather project them and put them on me as a little girl. And as children, what we tend to do is we tend to internalize everything. We start to take these ideas, these beliefs that are put onto us, and we start to think, oh, okay, maybe I am doing this. Maybe I am behaving like this. Maybe am I making them feel jealous about myself as a little child who's got no parents, who's got no mom bringing them up, and I'm being raised by my grandparents? Is that my fault? And we start to internalize these things as a child, and we start to take these beliefs and make them seem real and true. We start to internalize and make these become part of our unconscious conditioning. And as we grow up an adult, we start to behave in a certain way. For me, for example, I started attracting people in my life who would then use me how they wanted to use me. And then that was it. Then that would be the end of that one, and somebody else will come into my life. And then they would also use me. And for me, I would openly accept and allow this to happen because I wanted to feel loved. I wanted to feel worthy, and I wanted to feel secure. And it was that love that I was longing for. But instead, that love I should have had from my mother. Because these people were around me who would make me feel worthless, who would blame me for their downfalls and their insecurities. I remember this one incident where I was blamed for so much that this one person actually made me feel suicidal. Within myself, I was in a very, very dark place because of everything that this one person said. And this person made me feel suicidal to the point where I was like, that's it, that's my way out. I've had no proper upbringing, I've had no love, etc. Maybe this is all because of this. If I went away, that person's problems will be solved. And that's how I saw it. And at that moment, when I realized, well, actually, me thinking about taking my own life would solve that person's problems is not the way out. And I became aware of that situation. It's only when we become aware that we start to recognize the patterns, the triggers, and we start to set boundaries in order to protect ourselves so that we can get back our power. When I became aware of that situation, I immediately realized that I am not to blame. It's not my fault. And you might have had a similar situation when you look down into one of your earliest childhood memories, whether that's a happy memory or whether that's, a memory similar to mine, where maybe, you've had a situation where a parent has abandoned you, or, you've had a narcissistic parent, a controlling parent, or a controlling relationship. And it's only when you become aware and realize that you are not to blame for other people's problems. You do not take on their problems and internalize it and make it out to be your fault. It's not your fault. For the way that person feels, for the way they are treating you, it is not your fault. And when I became aware of that situation, and when I became aware of those feelings, that is when I realized that I can take back my power. My power, which I handed over to other people to make me feel in a certain way, to put me down so that they could feel better about themselves. It's when you start taking that power back, you do not have to hold on to that shame, that fear, that judgment. There's a lot of power in awareness. And when I became aware, I illuminated my situation and the story that I was attached to, that I believed in, that became part of my conditioning. And when I illuminated the story, I was able to separate myself from that situation. And when I separated myself from that situation and realized that I have the power over my beliefs, the power over my emotions, and I don't need these external people's validation, and I don't need these external people to make me feel like that, to put me down so that they could feel better about themselves. And I was able to start the healing process. I was able to start healing those conditionings. I was able to create new pathways in my brain and start realizing the trigger points and start creating new patterns and new waves in my brain and realize, oh, when that happens, I don't need to go back down that old path. I can take a new road and transform myself, start my healing journey, start to align myself with this higher version of myself that I know that exists somewhere within. And you too can do that as well. And the key is being aware of these childhood memories and perhaps journaling and writing down why certain things have happened. I mean, you might have had happy memories. Don't get me wrong, I've got some happy memories as well. But it's when you want to undo those childhood patterns that have trickled down into adulthood, that's when you need to start creating boundaries. And in order to create those boundaries, you need to look deep, dive deep and look at those childhood memories. What you deemed as normal, was that normal because that was your way of conditioning and believing and thinking? Or was that somebody putting that on you because of whatever was going on in their life? Once you start to realize these beliefs and these situations, you start to realize that you have a higher purpose in this life. You've come in this world for a reason. And maybe these things have happened. Maybe that's to do with, old trauma or anything like that, that you need to perhaps forgive and move on and detach yourself from these so that you can then tap into your higher purpose. Once we start to observe those thoughts, we can then interpret those thoughts and find the real meaning behind those thoughts, beliefs, and conditions. And we can then start to align ourselves with our higher self and our true purpose.